So imagine for a moment that you've just come out of a meeting with your financial advisor. And after weeks of discussions, you now have a written plan that shows how you can retire and not run out of money. But what's next? What happens on the first day of your retirement? And after hitting the snooze button for the 5th time in a row with no consequences, what does the rest of your day look like? How about the rest of the month or the next few years? Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the other half of the retirement puzzle, the non-financial part. What are some of the psychological challenges of walking away from a part of our life that for many years was part of our identity? What does your lifestyle in retirement look like? Now, to tackle these questions, we sat down with Matthew Messina, Director of Advisor Development at CI Consulting. So welcome back to Surviving Retirement. I'm Peter Guidode, Chartered Accountant, Certified Financial Planner, and Senior Wealth Manager. Let's get started. So thank you for joining us, everyone. Today we're with Matthew Messina, Director of Advisor Development at CI. Matthew, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
All right, it's great. So a little bit of background for our listeners. A couple of weeks ago, we got together and honestly, we had a little bit of a chat, and I was expecting, I guess, a little bit more of the what about retirement, like what's my number and how do we get there? But what I found interesting when we met was you were discussing the why.
Right.
Why are we retiring? And I thought that was very interesting. And you even talked about a workbook, which we'll get into a little bit later. But maybe if you could just give us a little bit of background of what inspired you to start this workbook about the why of retirement.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really came from a series of discussions that we had with financial advisors really across the country. And what we found was that those advisors are doing great work on the financial planning aspect of retirement. They're great with the numbers and giving their clients confidence in the finance of their retirement and comfort in those numbers and that they'd be okay. But what we found was the other side of the coin was the more holistic approach, the actual actions and activities that they're going to do with the money that financial plan is going to be funding them with. And so we came up with this idea of lifestyle planning. And that's effectively the day-to-day operation of your retirement and what you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis. And it's really caught on like fire in the advisor community. It's one of the most popular topics that we speak on, and one that's been very well received from both advisors and investors.
No, I can see why. I mean, a lot of times, we're very good at our industry about talking about the numbers and sustainability, and there's not much conversation that often goes about the why. What are you going to do when you are retired? So I could see how that's working. So when you're talking about the workbook, who's this really for, and what have you gotten in terms of feedback about how it can help their retirement?
Yeah, so the workbook went through really 2 stages, and I contributed greatly to the stage that we present today. And I would say the sweet spot is really anyone that's kind of 3 to 5 years out from retirement, because it's then they really start thinking about it. If they're a business owner, they probably have their succession plan in place, or if not, they're thinking about it. And so we think that's the sweet spot for having the conversations about lifestyle planning and going through the workbook. Now that said, it's also valuable for the individual that might already be in retirement and they're asking themselves, like, is there more to retirement than just sitting around watching television? And the answer is yes, and the workbook can really help them for that. So we really designed it for the person that's between 3 to 5 years out from retirement, but it can work for the person that's in retirement. And I'm 35 years old, and I went through the workbook myself, and it even had me thinking about my own retirement and what I want to do. So 3 to 5 years is the sweet spot, but I think anyone can really benefit from the conversation.
That's interesting. While we were talking about our meeting a few weeks ago, we talked about the other side of retirement planning, the non-financial part, and you've had some feedback, as you said. So what kind of feedback have you been getting about why is it so important to talk about this beyond the money factor?
Because retirement, when it doesn't go well, impacts more than just the person that's retiring. It can impact your family, it can impact your relationships. Yeah. I saw it with my own parents, where my dad retired, and when he retired, the pandemic struck. And so his retirement plan, poof, like that, was gone. And so he ended up just sitting around watching television. My mom, on the other hand, she was lucky enough to keep working on a full-time basis, and so she would leave to go to work. She'd go downstairs to say bye to my dad, who's in front of his TV watching CNN and stuff like that, and she'd come back home from a full day's work, go back downstairs, and lo and behold, there's my dad. And this went on for many, many months, and it put a lot of strain on that relationship, and it's because ultimately my dad didn't really have a backup plan, and he didn't plan at all, really. And so it can have an impact on our well-being. It can have an impact on our physical well-being and the cognitive well-being as well if it isn't carefully planned for.
Yeah, we don't give a lot of thought to that aspect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happens? Why do you think like a lot of people avoid talking about this personal part of retirement planning?
I think predominantly it's because there's, in North American culture in particular, there's really a negativity associated with retirement. The word retirement didn't have a negative connotation, like you're a bus and you're being put out of service and you're
kind of dropping
going to the
life.
junk heap, right? And so that negative connotation, I think some people, and we have a statistic that we share that shows that there was a survey from 2021, I believe, and it showed that 40% of retirees and pre-retirees feared the idea of retirement more than death itself.
Interesting. And
so, again, we think it's because of that negative connotation that we have with retirement. I'm old. I have nothing left to contribute to society. My most productive years are behind me, and that people are afraid of that. And that's why I think they're afraid to have the conversation. They're afraid to address it with anyone. And that's where I think it really stems from, that lack of purpose, that lack of not having a reason to wake up in the morning.
And that's probably a major reason also of why people struggle with this.
Yes, big time. Purpose is the single most important driver and motivator for someone, particularly when they're in retirement. Because work, be it a 9-to-5 job that we have or our own business, is, again, particularly in North American cultures, is central to our identities. And when you take that away from someone because they retire, they sell their business, a void is there. And if you can't fill that void, then you start to get into trouble. So that's why it's, we've really run with this lifestyle planning, because we think it can really help people in a meaningful way.
But that's interesting, because there's obviously a very non-financial aspect about retirement planning that can also derail things. So I'm hearing purpose is important. The fact that a lot of times we've spent a lot of time in our careers as part of our identity, as you said. Are there other non-financial challenges that you kind of found out during your work and your research in this area?
The health aspect is a big one. And we talk about finding purpose, and that can be a difficult thing to do. And the point we try to nail home when we're having these conversations is, if there is a single objective you can encourage your clients to have, it's to be healthy. And that could be playing pickleball or going for a swim every day.
That's a big
yoga.
thing, pickleball.
Yeah, pickleball's huge, right? I play with my father-in-law, and he beats me often. He's very good. But there's really there's a virtuous cycle of health and wealth, where if you're healthy, you can pursue whatever activities you want, which can maintain that sense of purpose. You can also work later in life, and it can be a part-time job. It could be a new business that you started in your golden years, as we like to call them. And so being healthy is foundational. And if you're healthy, it can contribute to your wealth, because you can eat better food, you can pursue whatever activities you want to stay in shape, and it just really reduces that financial stress. It's that kind of that slow, silent killer that, if we're exposed to for too long, can really have some detrimental effects. So there's the physical, and then the second that we really hammer home is the cognitive aspect as well. Right? We talked about how watching television is an easy default for a lot of retirees. That can really accelerate the development of a lot of different cognitive diseases, and having something to learn is a good way to combat that. So be it learning a language, learning how to play the guitar, learning how to cook a new recipe, anything really, but just learning something new is a very powerful way to find meaning and to combat that idea that, you know, you're done after retirement, you got nothing else to bring to the table. It's the furthest thing from the truth.
Well, you know, when we talk about the golden years, for a lot of folks, it's not so golden sometimes.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And that's a bit of a challenge. And you make me think of my own dad, who's well into his 80s, and I still get a text from him from time to time. He says, "Okay, Wordle, 4 guesses," and he's looking for some a little help over there. So I think that's great. When we were going through this, and I'd like to take a little bit of time, just talk about identity and purpose and relationships especially, because one thing we've noticed is obviously, you know, as people age, their circle naturally starts to die off.
Yeah.
So these relationships are so key, and a lot of the studies that we've read ourselves about longevity and the healthiness of older folks really has to do with their connection with people and their connection with their family and friends. Can you talk a little bit about that, if you found that to be the case?
Yeah, I mean, this became quite prevalent during the pandemic,
Right.
where a lot of people were lonely, a lot of people were isolated, right? And it's a key fear of individuals that are approaching retirement or in retirement is losing those social networks.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us, or a lot of our friends, a lot of the people that we speak to outside of our family are at work. Yeah. And so, again, if you can plan activities where you meet new people, my father-in-law, for example, is an avid pickleballer now, and he goes to a club in Scarborough where he lives, and he's there pretty much every day. And, you know, he's got his new circle of friends, and, you know, they talk smack to one another before the matches and stuff like that.
Some things don't change,
Some things don't change, right? It's, again, the planning is, it helps on the physical, it helps on the relationship side and the cognitive side, of course, but that's the kind of the underlying or the underrated aspect of this retirement planning is it will help you maintain and maybe even expand the social circles that you already have.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely critical, and if you can address the loneliness that some people will face, you're doing great work.
I think that's important, absolutely. I'd like to talk about the workbook for a little bit and switch to that. Now, can you give us, I mean, we'll show the workbook and we'll make it available to our listeners a little bit later, but can you talk to us about the workbook and how it can actually guide someone through this process step by step?
Yeah. So the workbook has 3 steps. And the first step is laying out a series of activities, listing a series of activities across 5 different categories. And those categories are the type of work or a job that you want to get. And so, for example, you know, my dad, when he retired, he got a job at a casino that was being built just outside of Toronto. It's called the Pickering Casino and Resort today. And he's there, he works part-time, 2-3 shifts a week, 8 hours per shift, and he absolutely loves it. The energy of the casino, the people that he meets, you know, the mental math that he has to do every day, you know, dealing cards at the table and stuff, and it gives him that reason to wake up in the morning, right? And he loves it. So some type of work or job to pursue. Second are activities that you'd like to pursue to stay in shape. And the key consideration here are activities that you can do year-round. A lot of people want to golf in retirement. Right, my dad, certainly one of those people, but the unfortunate reality is in Canada you really can't do that. And so think of activities that you can pursue year-round. Things like yoga, things like, you know, swimming, you know, going for a run or walking actively. These are all activities that people can pursue, so long as it can be done annually, year-round, all the time. That's critical. Third set of activities are things you want to learn, like playing the guitar, learning a new language, learning how to cook. Fourth are activities with your spouse or your partner. And we talked about loneliness earlier, and this is a powerful way of alleviating that. And then the 5th category are activities to pursue with either friends or extended family members, like your children, grandchildren. And with those 5 categories, we ask individuals to come up with a list of about like 3 to 4 activities per category. And that's really the first step, to have that list. The second step, and this is one that starts to tie things together, and you really start to see the value of the workbook. And that's filling out the sample calendar or the blank calendar rather, that we have. We really try to push people to be as specific as possible. What time are you going to go to bed? What time are you going to wake up? Breakfast, lunch, dinner. What time are you going to eat? I did this exercise with my mom, who was really anxious about retiring. She's a business owner, busybody, can't stop moving, doesn't want to stop moving. And she told me she was struggling with the idea. And when we did the workbook, we went through that second step. And she maybe filled out about 80% of the calendar. She wanted to learn how to knit and volunteer and get back into the gym and stuff like that. And she did the calendar and she looked at it, and I could just see the anxiety just melt off her face. And she's like, oh, okay, like here, this is what retirement looks like. And
you could see it.
I'll be okay. Yeah, she could literally visualize it. And so it's a powerful second step. The third step is probably the most challenging step, but if you've created this list of activities and there are a lot of activities on that list that you've never pursued before, it's the most important step, because it's that step where we ask the individual to really pursue the calendar that they have created for themselves, to test it out. And it's a means of cultivating accountability in the person. And so we ask them to sign the bottom of the document.
That's interesting.
To provide a date when they're going to try it, or a range of dates if they want to try the whole week. And then we ask them to print out a couple copies. Give one to their financial advisor, give one to a spouse, a friend, someone to stay on them to make sure that they've pursued it. And the reason we ask them to try is because those ideas on the list from step one are really just that. They're ideas. We have no idea if you're really going to enjoy them. This is how we find out. I like to tell the story of the aunt and uncle of a colleague of mine. Their retirement dream was to go buy an RV, go to St. John's, Newfoundland, drive across the country, and end up in Victoria, BC. And so they did this. 2 weeks later, they got divorced. Right?
It's not like an RV trip to really test a couple. Yeah.
And so there are probably some underlying issues in that relationship, right? But it would have been so much easier if this had just rented an RV over a weekend or a week, and maybe realize that being cooped up in this thing with you is not everything I thought it was going to be. And so that's why we actively encourage people to really test out that calendar, because it's important.
It's interesting when I saw that calendar, and I think it's very similar to the type of work that we do when we encourage people and we do a roadmap and a plan for them, the financial aspect. It holds people accountable, and it allows us to visualize literally how that path to retirement is going to look like from a financial basis. So I'm thinking the calendar actually is another visual prompt. It gives you that ability to actually see how your day is going to look like, how your week's going to look like when you are retired. So I think that was a very powerful, and that's something we'll be able to share with you as well. When we're taking a look a little bit about like other questions that people need to be thinking of when they're looking at this next chapter in their lives, what other things come to mind? What are some of the other things that people should be considering?
In the workbook, we have a series of questions to prompt people, particularly that first step about thinking about the activities. And one of those questions, for example, is like, what does your ideal day in retirement look like? And that can really go in many different directions. And I think by asking that question, someone can really explore and understand what's important to them and what they really want to get better at in retirement. It could be getting closer to their children or their grandchildren. That's great.
It's very valid.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's a difficult question to answer because it will really be different for everyone. But I think in just asking that question, and we have, I think, 4 or 5 questions in the workbook that serve as prompts to get people thinking about their golden years, their latter years. And I think just identifying the things that are really important to them is an important first step, and really using that to guide the rest of the process.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. When you're talking, we talked a little bit about conversations with spouses, and family members, or even advisors. Who usually would initiate these type of conversations? It's not something that you typically talk about with your advisors, but it's something that's such a critical element of retirement.
That's such a good question, and one that I think isn't asked enough. I think financial advisors are uniquely positioned to have this conversation with their clients. You've likely had a relationship for many, many years, if not decades, with your clients. You understand their financial picture better than anyone else. And you're a certain distance away from that individual from like a relationship perspective. It's a business relationship, and business relationships have to be very factual. and that that objectivity can be very helpful in having very real and sometimes very painful conversations about what retirement looks like. I'll give you an example with my dad. When he kept watching TV during the pandemic, initially my mom would really give it to him because he started like putting on weight, and he started limping because he'd hurt his knee previously, and my mom really had like, stop watching TV, do anything else but watching TV. And eventually I would say that, and my brother and sister would say that, and his answer would always be the same thing, like, I do what I do, leave me alone, and I'm fine. And he'd clam right up and go downstairs and watch more TV, of course. But I suspect if unfortunately he didn't have a financial advisor at the time, but if he did, and the financial advisor told him, hey,
a third party.
Yeah, a third party,
right,
exactly.
yeah.
This is, you keep doing this, like it's a slippery slope, my friend. I think it would have hit him a little bit harder than just his family members telling him. So I think that unique relationship that financial advisors have with their clients is a very potent combination of both knowledge and relationship that can be very, very helpful for people in retirement.
That's very interesting too, because when we work with our clients, we're often anticipating a certain age at which all this is going to happen, and that presumes that the health is going to be good and that the health is going to be there. But if we are not careful about it, and we do see them every year, that's something that oftentimes we need to be mindful of, and even not just the physical health, but the cognitive health as well. You mentioned earlier, you were talking about your mom and how you went through this calendar, and you visibly saw her stress being reduced. How does that help? Have you seen that with other retirees, that once they've gone through this process of going through the workbook, that they kind of feel less stressed, that they're even a little bit more confident about what the future holds?
Yeah. Even if I find they fill the activity sheet out and kind of a loose idea of what they want to do, and they maybe don't fill the calendar out like completely, but just kind of jot down some quick ideas. What they have is a framework, and they know that if they use this framework and they go through the 3 steps, that they will eventually figure it out. My mom was fortunate to know that she would really enjoy knitting. She had a personal trainer in the past, and volunteering is always something she's wanted to do, and so those were easy for her. But if, let's say, knitting didn't work out because there wasn't a class for her to find, she has a process where, okay, I just go through the activities again, I go through the prompts, I'll figure something out, put it in the calendar, I'll try it and see if it works. So if it doesn't work the first time, it's not a reason to give up on the workbook altogether. It takes trial and error. It's we're planning out our life in a sense.
Process.
And it's a process, exactly.
Last quick question. What surprised you most when you were developing this workbook and this whole process? What caught you off guard and something you didn't expect?
I think the impact that it had on myself as well, and just other people broadly that are within the circle of the person retiring. As I said, I designed the workbook myself, and in going through that list of activities, it made me think about what I want to do in my retirement, and make me want to pursue activities that I can do today and well into my retirement. And also the importance of our mentality when it comes to retiring and just aging in general, and seeing aging as a positive thing, a beautiful thing. And that's a very powerful tool and a very powerful mindset to have, that if you see aging as a positive thing, it will have a very powerful and positive impact on your life and your well-being and your life expectancy and that type of stuff. So that's what struck me the most, was just how powerful our subconscious thoughts towards aging and retiring can really be.
That's a great thought to leave us on. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time, and I think it's a terrific process. It does help a lot with the planning that we do in conjunction. It fits perfectly. It's part of the puzzle that oftentimes we don't get to discuss often, and we should. I mean, these are very important factors. So thank you again for coming by.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
So if there's something that we've learned, is that retirement does certainly have 2 facets, 2 faces, And one deals with the financial and the other with lifestyle. And I think it's really important for all of us to spend some time talking about this. To our friends out there, if you'd like a copy of this workbook that we've been talking about, then scan the QR code that will be on the screen and we'll get a copy over to you. And with that, I'd like to remind everybody to be kind to yourselves and to others, and we'll see you in our next video.